Hello, I am Dr. Scott McLaughlin. I'm an Irish composer and I live and work in the UK at the University of Leeds in West Yorkshire. Today I'm going to talk about current aspects of my own practice in working with the guitar, specifically in relation to feedback mostly, and also through the use of inharmonic spectra. I'll get onto those two things in a moment. My interest in continuous sound is because I want to be able to have a continuous performative manipulation of the sound, but particularly though in relation to its indeterminacy. I'm interested in the materiality of the instrument, that is, what's happening with the physical material itself, and allowing those physical materials to have a kind of agency of their own, to speak for themselves and to express their own preferences to a certain extent, which you'll see a little as I go on. When I'm talking about continuous sound on the guitar, this is an electric guitar, so in most cases I'm either using feedback or some kind of electromagnetic resonator. EBows are fine. I prefer to use the Vibesware GR1. It's got a little bit more power, it's a little bit more able to reach some of the more interesting indeterminate aspects of the string. Similarly, while I'm very interested in the natural harmonic series of the guitar string itself, and you'll see this in one of the pieces later, I'm really interested in making the strings inharmonic. That is, essentially, inharmonicity creates a kind of a bell-like timbre usually. What's happening is that some sort of manipulation of the string is altering the ratio between the mass of the string and its length, so it's knocking some of the partials of its harmonic series out of tune with each other, and instead of perceiving them as a single string sound, a single note, what you're hearing instead is more like a bell, where there are multiple pitches running against each other. So in all of these cases, my interest is primarily not in controlling the specifics of this sound, but in setting up a topology of indeterminate possibilities. Some things are more likely than others, some things are very unlikely but not impossible, and it's about manipulating the instrument in such a way that these things might then start to happen. The two pieces you'll see coming up, one of which is a reworking of a piece from 2013 called Surfaces of Emergence, which is for feedback guitars. And what's happening with this is that I'm specifically using motion of the guitar, so moving the guitar itself relative to the amplifier and the distance changing between the amplifier and the guitar itself, or the angle, etc. All of these variables are causing the pitch of the feedback to change. The feedback pitch will always be a harmonic of one of the strings, but it's slightly indeterminate to know exactly which one is going to come out at any moment. So part of the way that this piece works is that the score asks the player to continuously try to create patterns, A-B patterns. Find a pitch, find a new pitch, try to go back to the previous pitch. So you're trying to create these back and forths, but to do this creating of the back and forth, you have to shift your body position. It might be quite a small shift, just changing the angle of the guitar, or it might be something quite radical, stepping somewhere, moving away. And of course, trying to then move back to that position, we come into a hysteresis effect. Hysteresis is the history, the path dependency of the event, so that now that we have a certain pitch ringing on the guitar, trying to go back to a previous resonance is more difficult because the current resonance is overpowering it. So the situation is constantly changing. The algorithm for the score is very simple. You're just trying to create patterns. You're trying to go back and forth between two things. And when you find strong harmonics, this can be quite easy. And then my tendency is to try and push out of those a little bit to explore the edges a bit more. But sometimes they're just fleeting harmonics that you never find your way back to again. The second aspect of this is dealing with the inharmonicity of the instrument. In these cases, the main way that I do this is through using a preparation of some sort, in the sense of John Cage's prepared piano. So the two examples you'll see here today, one is quite simple, just using a small ball of blue tack or white tack or some sort of material like that stuck to the string. The position on the string will affect the harmonics that come out, or the timbre or the harmony of it. Equally, the weight of the mass of it will also affect it. What's interesting about this is that rather than moving all of the partials, what effect this has is to slightly filter some of the partials. You get a flattening effect, you get the distinct inharmonicity of partials going out of tune with each other, but also there's a very strong filtering where certain partials are really strong and really want to come out, and others are much more resistant. In some ways, this can be more interesting because it reduces the palette of possibilities, but it means that some are very probable to come out, while others need to be chased and dug a little more. The second technique is slightly more advanced than this. It uses 3D printed preparations that couple two of the strings together. By coupling, I mean in the mechanical sense in physics, where the vibrations from one travel through this preparation into the other string and they become a single vibrating system. This means that any change to either of the strings will affect the resonances of the other string. So when you're dealing with, as you'll see later, a continuous sound piece where I'm using the EBow on one of the strings, alterations to the other string then have sometimes small, sometimes very large effects on what's happening on the string that's actually being activated. You can hear here a brief example of this kind of inharmonicity by playing these two strings. So the two pieces that you're going to hear in this recital, one is a pure improvisation, as in I set up a set of material and I just responded to it. It's quite a minimal improvisation, but it's definitely improvised in the sense that nothing was really pre-planned other than the fact that I wanted to emphasize the inharmonicity and I wanted to use the particular techniques that are used in the piece. The other piece, Surfaces of Emergence, has a score, as you can see here and before, but this is a very open score. It's a text score. It lays out the principles of how the piece is to be played, rather than specifying moment-to-moment interactions or structures. As I mentioned in the abstract for this talk, the concept of improvisation here is much closer to the generalized and critical approach taken by Lewis and Piekut, where we're talking about improvisation not so much as a style, but in the larger sense of a response to contingency. And that's what this compositional process is all about. It's about setting up a contingent process in the instrument so that by playing the instrument in this way, some things are more contingent than others, some things are very contingent, some things are very probable. But by setting this up, the score is creating points of tension and points of possibility that allow things to emerge. So structure can emerge out of the piece rather than being imposed on the piece from the outset. In terms of a larger context for this, I place it in the context of experimental musics as explored post John Cage by composers such as Alvin Lucier, David Dunn, Eliane Radigue, Pauline Oliveros, and many more. You can see here clearly the relationship between the text scores that you'd find in Oliveros and Lucier especially, and Dunn to a certain extent, that for all of these composers, part of the interest and attraction of composition was in setting up a system and then letting it happen itself. Arguably, the work of David Tudor is also incredibly important here, although he would have considered himself slightly less a composer, but the principle remains the same. Tudor would set up unstable systems and then allow continuous interaction to allow emergent states to create the music itself. A composer such as Eliane Radigue, while not directly using scores, approaches the instrument in the same way, working with the musician in such a way that they come up with, co-composed between them, they come up with a response to what she's looking for in the piece, particular types of unstable sound worlds, particular types of interactions between the musician and their instrument that brings out this instability, that brings it to the fore. But I think it's key here to hold on to the idea that this isn't instability for its own sake. This isn't just random noises. The point of this instability is that it reveals patterns that are inherent to the instruments and the context anyways. And of course, these contexts can change. If I move the preparation, if I use a different instrument or a different amplifier, if I play feedback in a different room, the pitches will be different, the response will be different, the way I have to interact with the instrument and the space and the setup is going to be different, but the principles of the piece remain the same. The principles are still about allowing the materiality of the instrument to come to the fore, allowing certain strong resonances to lead the way, but then deliberately shadowing, overpowering, suppressing, moving past those strong resonances to find other resonances that are behind this to try and get a fuller picture of what's happening. In all of this, just to wrap it back to the two pieces you're going to hear, in the recital, the interest I have here is in what emerges from these set of interactions. Once I put the system in motion and a player, in this case me, is working with it, then the real interest becomes in what are the emergent possibilities and how are they responded to. In the case of surfaces of emergence, I deliberately set up, as you'll see, it's two versions of me playing at the same time. I deliberately set this up such that I had a vague sense of what the overall timing of the recording was going to be, so that I could start and end in more or less the same position, as you'll see. Whereas with the other piece, the improvisation, this was completely unstructured other than I wanted to explore a certain breadth of possibilities within the system that I set up. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.